Wolfenstein Youngblood serves as a side game in the rebooted Wolfenstein series that was started all the way back in 2014. Developed by Machine Gun Studios once again, but with this time the inclusion of Arcane Studios, this installment tends to add a number of additions to the franchise while preparing us for the next big installment. And while in my personal opinion there are some creative choices here that didn't exactly work out as well as I'm sure the studio would have wanted, I do think that there is enough here to at least give it a try, even if you don't end up buying this game. The story this time around takes place 19 years after the events of Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, and you will take control of one of the two Blazkowicz twins as they make their way to Paris to find their father BJ Blazkowicz, who has gone missing. And unfortunately, this is where the disappointment begins. Because with me being such a story-driven gamer, having a solid storyline can sometimes be the deciding factor on whether or not I will truly enjoy playing through a game. Running around and killing Nazis is fun, but if there is no overarching payoff, then it just comes to feeling like a complete waste of time, and Youngblood barely has enough time to even establish a solid plot. The entire game can be summed up to this. You arrive in Paris and you are told that you need to get access to 3 supercomputers located in 3 towers, and once you've done that, you'll gain access to an underground lab, and then once you get to that lab, the game is pretty much over. A plot this bare bones could be completed in as little as 4 to 5 hours, which was barely enough time for me to even really get to know the characters, and unfortunately, the character development in this game is practically non-existent. This game revolves around the twins and their friend Abby, and within the first 10 minutes of the game, they go from 2 19-year-olds who have never left home to 2 crazed Nazi killing machines, with them never really having much time to develop throughout the game. Personally, I can't even tell these two apart, as Jess and So both act like a couple of frat boys in college acting out all the stereotypes that you can imagine, and as for Abby, being the daughter of 2 important characters from the previous game, she is given less than 10 minutes of screen time and acts as nothing more than your objective communicator, and really only has one moment throughout the entire game where she actually gets to do something. The only interesting part of this game literally does not happen until the end, and trust me folks, this is not a spoiler, but once you finally find BJ and find out exactly why he was in Paris to begin with, you get a little tease of what he's been up to, and it's this little tease that is actually more interesting than anything that happened throughout the entire game, making it very clear that Youngblood serves as nothing more than an explanation game explaining why we will more than likely not see much of the twins in the true follow-up to the New Colossus. And due to the fact that BJ is in fact the face of this franchise, whatever plot revolves around him is going to be the far more interesting one. And I think Machine Gun Studios probably knew that from the very beginning and simply just want to put this game out to pass the time. Now when it comes to the gameplay, it is made very obvious from the very beginning that it is in this department that the mass majority of effort was put into. However, it seems that the studio wanted to try something a little bit experimental and put a heavy focus on wanting gamers to play through this game on co-op. Now, you don't have to play this game with another player, as I can say right now that your partner's AI is actually pretty good here. They never really venture too far away from you and are more than capable of doing their fair share of Nazi killing by themselves without you needing to babysit them. And if by any chance you happen to find yourself getting into any kind of serious trouble, then they usually are able to revive you and get you back in the fight rather quickly. However, this can certainly backfire against you when it comes to taking on the more tougher enemies and boss fights throughout the game, as sticking together simply makes you a much bigger target for their enemies to focus on, and with your AI partner being unable to follow orders, it is in these moments that I would suggest that you play with another player, as being able to separate and force the bosses to have to focus on one of you while the other player flanks them or attacks them from the back is the easiest way to get through some of the more tougher fights. Youngblood, like the New Colossus, does have a hub area in the form of the catacombs, but sadly it is nowhere near as big or as interactive as the submarine hub in the New Colossus. Like 2 previous installments, there's also a great deal of collectibles to find throughout the game in the form of cassette tapes or even floppy disks, but I personally didn't go out of my way to find these unless I absolutely needed them to find certain codes to get to specific doors. Wolfenstein this time around decided to add a much heavier focus on using RPG elements throughout the game, and as you continue to kill Nazis and complete objectives throughout the game, you will then begin to level up. and as you level up, you'll then gain access to special credits, and you can use these credits to upgrade certain stats about your characters like their health or armor. These credits can also be used to grant you access to an expansive amount of customizations that are available for all the different weapons that you collect over the course of the game. And this element, I must admit, was impressive, with certain customizations being able to really help you deal with certain enemies. And from my point of view, there is certainly enough enemy variety to the point where it is best to experiment on what guns work best on certain enemies. Outside of the very few story-driven missions, there are a lot of side missions to deal with. However, unfortunately, these side missions serve absolutely no purpose and add nothing to the story, and all they are here for is to basically gain you more experience so that you can level grind. And if you choose not to play through any of these side missions and just decide to focus on the story missions, then you will get to a point in the game where you will find yourself in a section in which you will find yourself surrounded with enemies that are too many levels ahead of you, with some of them being so strong that they can almost one-shot you. This encourages you to go back and do more side missions in order to level up, therefore you can then fight your way through these sections. Design-wise, visually, this game doesn't look any better than the new Colossus did when it was released almost 2 years ago. When it comes to Youngblood's variety of locations, there is certainly a level of laziness that was applied here. Despite having different locations that you can explore, from airships to city streets to sewers to underground bunkers and even towers, a lot of these locations look completely identical to each other, despite the fact that the game tells you that these locations are located in distant parts of Paris away from each other. Now, it's not to say that every location is identical, but it does happen enough to the point where you will undoubtedly notice it throughout the game. When it comes to the city streets of Paris, there is certainly a high quality level of verticality that was added here, as there are several buildings that have multiple floors that you can explore, and this can help when it comes to granting you options on how you choose to move through certain locations. You can either go crazy and take a straightforward offensive approach and just kill every Nazi in sight, or you can use the environment to sneak your way and kill your enemies one at a time, or you can just take the high road and try to avoid conflict entirely. What Wolfenstein Youngblood doesn't lack is options and giving you the freedom to play through this game any way you want, and it is in these moments where I believe you will find the most enjoyment. Now, in conclusion, Wolfenstein Youngblood has been getting a lot of real mixed reviews that have been really all over the place. Now, I'm not going to be so generous as to say that this game is anyway great, because it's not. But I'm not going to be so harsh to say that this game is absolutely terrible and you should never play it. I'm kind of in the middle, because when the game is working, or if you're playing with the right person, and there's a lot of concepts that I think in practice can be enjoyable. And trust me, if you're playing with the right friend, then I think you can make almost any game with co-op very enjoyable. And while I think the studios understood full-heartedly that they weren't making a full-price experience, because trust me, this isn't. I think they simply wanted to test out the waters about this whole co-op thing, because I'm 100% sure that this is not going to be an aspect that will be added in the next main installment of the Wolfenstein franchise. So it's best to kind of just test it out with a second-rate game, which this is. Now, at its best, it's just a mediocre Wolfenstein game. I mean, if you want to get your fair share of Nazi killing, you'll get it here, but it won't feel any different than what you've experienced in previous installments. And if I had to compare it in terms of quality, this game is by no means on the level of something like the New Order or the new Colossus, but I certainly would say that it is a step above something like, say, Old Blood. Now, if I had to give Wolfenstein Youngblood a rating, I'm going to have to go in the middle of the road and give it a 5 out of 10. This is certainly not something that I would suggest you go out of your way and buy, even at its retail price of like $40. And I think even some stores are selling it even less at about $30. I mean, the most I would recommend that you do is either rent this at Redbox or rent this from GameFly, or just get this at like $20 just to add to your collection. But this is certainly not at all a game you should pick up on the first day, or even at a somewhat sales price. But I do think that this is something you should at least give a try, just to test out the whole co-op aspect, because I think it can work at times, but I just hope they don't add this in the next game. Now, if you like my review, I really like you to give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to check with me in my future movie, video game, and other topic idea videos. And if you could also press one of the links in the description down below so you can follow me on all my social media outlets. Keep tracking me in my future works also. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.